Given the popularity of the character thanks to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you would think that Thanos has always been a major player, and yet that hasn't always been the case.
Thanos debuted in an issue of Iron Man as just kind of a run-of-the-mill alien terrorist whose appearance was mirrored on a character from Jack Kirby's New Gods comics for DC called Metron. All that really happened was that Marvel editor-in-chief Roy Thomas told Thanos' chief creator, Jim Starlin, that if he wanted to rip off the New Gods, then rip off the only member of the New Gods that anyone actually cared about, which was Darkseid. Starlin would then take over the bi-monthly Captain Marvel comic, which featured a storyline that gave Thanos a bit more of an expanded backstory as a member of the Titans, a race of immortal beings who lived on the titular moon of Saturn.
The Titans themselves have later been retconned into being part of Jack Kirby's Eternals mythos, with Thanos being a part of the Deviant race.
The Captain Marvel storyline saw Thanos attempt to use a cosmic cube to take over the universe. Along the way, he destroyed a car carrying the Douglas family. It was then that Thanos' great-grandfather Kronos transferred the consciousness of family patriarch Arthur Douglas into a newly constructed body called Drax the Destroyer. Also, Thanos' father Mentor took now orphan daughter Heather Douglas under his wing to nurture her latent psychic abilities, eventually leading to her becoming a character called Moondragon.
Thanos would ultimately be thwarted by a combination of Mar-Vell, Moondragon, Drax, and the Avengers, culminating in Mar-Vell smashing the cosmic cube with a karate chop. The storyline proved reasonably popular with critics, and Starlin was able to move on to a newly relaunched Adam Warlock comic.
Starlin would then take Thanos over to the Adam Warlock comic as a sometimes opponent, sometimes friend of the messianic cosmic superhero. Eventually, it was discovered that Thanos was after a series of gems called the Infinity Gems. Yes, I know they're called stones in the MCU, but here they're called gems. Once again, this was all being done in an attempt to either destroy or take over the universe.
And what exactly fuels Thanos' lust for power? Well, it turns out that Thanos is in love with the living embodiment of death for the Marvel Universe, who appears as a skeletal woman with an occasionally Caucasian human face. Thanos is so in love that he's hoping to achieve ultimate power to prove himself worthy of her affections.
Ultimately, Warlock fused his essence with the soul gem that resided on his forehead at the time and turned Thanos to stone, with Warlock sacrificing himself in the process.
And from there, outside of a couple other minor appearances both done by Starlin, Thanos pretty much vanished from the Marvel Universe altogether. In fact, his persona was so non grata that about a decade later, when writer Steve Englehart pitched the idea of reviving Thanos in the pages of Silver Surfer, the editorial department literally responded with, "Who?"
However, Marvel editor-in-chief Tom DeFalco began looking into Thanos and decided that bringing him back could actually be a good idea, but only if Jim Starlin were the one to do it.
Starlin was coming off a run at DC that was spotty at best, with his most noteworthy work being the Batman Death in the Family storyline that saw the Jason Todd incarnation of Robin killed off via 1-900 number. Starlin would set out to create a story that would not only bring Thanos back to prominence within the Marvel Universe, but would come to define all of Marvel's cosmic characters for decades afterwards. And today we're looking at the story. This is the entire saga of the Infinity Gauntlet, starting with the pages of Silver Surfer and the rebirth of Thanos.
After a long time traveling, the Silver Surfer stops by on a literally deserted planet for a brief rest. Admiring the sun setting over the dunes, he falls asleep. He's soon jolted from his slumber by the sound of a large stone citadel emerging from the terrain. He enters the building, finds a huge chamber, and almost bumps into a humanoid rodent and a decaying man carrying a large box for the Mistress. The lackeys seem to pay no further mind to the Silver Surfer as they carry out their task. The Surfer realizes this is probably just a dream as the Mistress demands the container be opened. The Surfer recognizes the Mistress as Death, and she's performing a ritual to return none other than one of her most devoted followers, Thanos, to life. The decaying man explains that there's an imbalance between life and death in the universe, and the only remedy is to eliminate half of the life of the universe, which is something that Thanos is more willing to do for his great love. However, Death has also been able to foresee an obstacle in the form of the Silver Surfer, which is why she brought him here. Confused as to whether or not he's actually still dreaming, the Surfer bolts out of the Citadel only to find millions of beings attempting to throw a child into a volcano in some form of sacrifice. The Surfer manages to rescue the infant, only for it to transform into a giant monster and swallow him whole. It's then that the Silver Surfer wakes up in the desert, confirming that he was only dreaming. He takes off, hoping to never experience something like that again. However, dreams can actually be more real than they appear, as the Surfer soon realizes as he runs right into Thanos. The Titan is willing to be diplomatic and explains why it's believed that the imbalance needs to be dealt with the way Death wants it to. The fact of the matter is, life cannot exist without death, as Thanos proceeds to teleport the Silver Surfer to Earth and explain that because there's been so many advances in life-extending and life-saving medicine and technology that, well, less people are dying, and soon civilizations will expand off their homeworlds. It's then that they'll wind up encountering each other and begin exchanging supplies. However, even then, supplies will eventually run out, and that'll just lead to more famine, pain, and death than, well, even death can handle.
I'm sorry, folks, but I'm afraid the story is going to start getting a little, political.
The Surfer denies any idea that overpopulation would destroy everything. Overall, people are pretty smart and would know not to do anything that was too devastating. With that in mind, Thanos teleports the Silver Surfer to the peaceful planet of Solaria. The planet is only home to a peaceful primitive race that has no predators or enemies. However, their population is also spiraling out of control, with the planet running out of food within 20 years. The Solarians are just far too primitive to be taught how to protect their environment, so a bigger plan needs to be implemented. Thanos reveals that he knowingly exposed the Surfer to various Earthborne diseases which are now on Solaria. He then teleports the Surfer a few months into the future to see what's happened to the planet, and indeed, half the Solarians' population is gone. Still, the Surfer is able to pass on some antibodies to one of the survivors, which can be passed on to others, stemming the destruction. The Surfer also does stay behind to clean up some of the bodies, which does little to assuage his guilt. Meanwhile, news of Thanos' resurrection begins to spread throughout the galaxy, reaching the Elders of Titan. Kronos, the High Eternal, knows what must be done and decides to return Drax the Destroyer to the land of the living.
I should point out there's basically two incarnations of Drax the Destroyer. The first incarnation maintained the average intelligence of Arthur Douglas. However, each subsequent time Drax has been revived, he's come back a little bit slower, a little bit dumber, and slowly progressed into being a monosyllabic beef chunk.
In order to find more information on Thanos, the Silver Surfer takes off to Avengers Mansion. There, Captain America lets the Surfer look up as much information on the Avengers computer as he can. After reading up on the Avengers' encounters with Thanos involving the Cosmic Cube and Adam Warlock, Cap directs the Surfer to Thanos' homeworld of Titan, which doesn't greatly enthuse the Surfer, given that he has to deal with Thanos' brother Eros.
Okay, so I guess we have to address Thanos' brother Eros, a.k.a. Star Fox, a.k.a. that guy Harry Styles played during the end credit scenes of Eternals. Now, if the name isn't a clue, Eros has the ability to manipulate emotions. Most prominently, he can basically make anyone fall in love with him. And if you think that sounds just a tiny bit problematic, that's kind of because it is. Especially since throughout many of his appearances in the 1980s, his hedonism was played off as a joke. And the idea that he was just walking into the room and immediately seducing all women was, well, not aging very well at all. In fact, it really wasn't addressed until about 2005. So yeah, he's a little uncomfortable at times.
The Surfer arrives on Titan to talk with Mentor, who fills him in on Thanos' past, namely murdering his mother at the age of 10. This all gets interrupted by the sudden appearance of Drax the Destroyer. The Surfer pays little mind to Drax's demands to know where Thanos is, which naturally leads to a massive fight breaking out. The two quite literally brawl across the cosmos, with the Surfer even going as far as to try to fly through a star in order to drop Drax. However, the Destroyer still seems to maintain a grip on the Surfer's board. Finally, the Surfer calls the truth and hits on the idea to try to locate Thanos. The two head to Earth and the headquarters of the Fantastic Four, passing off the group's television as an intergalactic tracking device. The Surfer has Drax watch for any possible information hidden in an episode of Green Acres and takes off to another planet. Meanwhile, Thanos tracks down the location of his old pirate vessel, Sanctuary 3, and teleports in to confront the group's new leader, Nebula. In order to prove he's returned to life, Thanos takes down her chief enforcer, Gator, and then blasts Nebula so she catches on fire. She runs off, and he sends an underling to finish everything off for him.
Nebula is a space mercenary who took over the Sanctuary 3 by claiming to be Thanos' granddaughter. This is why he's going after her.
The underling catches up to Nebula as she literally hits the showers to douse the flame. He doesn't kill her, though, rather he just takes her to a safe space. Meanwhile, Thanos gets contacted by Death. He explains that simple plagues aren't going to be enough to accomplish your goal in a relatively speedy amount of time. To do that, he needs something way more powerful. The Infinity Gems.
I know. Technically they're called Soul Gems here. They don't get renamed until the next part, which is what we're covering now. This is Thanos Quest.
Thanos contacts the Silver Surfer for a showdown on a planet's sewer level. There, he sets it up to make it appear that the Surfer kills him with a blast of the power cosmic, leading the Surfer to do his pose from the death screen of the old NES game. Now Thanos can begin his quest with no resistance. First up for Thanos is the Nexus of Realities, where the possessor of the Soul Gem, the In-Betweener, is being held by the Lords of Order and Chaos. He cooks up a story about wanting to betray Mistress Death and is willing to aid and escape for a price. The two match energy frequencies to blow apart the In-Betweener's prison. However, before he can knock Thanos out, the Titan points out that the dichotomous being's powers don't function in the Nexus and rips the Soul Gem from the In-Betweener's head. After a brief meeting with Death where he reaffirms his loyalty, Thanos moves on to the planet Tamaria and the owner of the Power Gem, Trico Scatterus, champion of the universe. The two engage in a brawl that literally destroys the planet they're on, and Thanos offers the champion a free ride to the next world in exchange for the Power Gem. Once the deal is completed, Thanos quite literally drops the champion off at the next planet and leaves.
So who exactly are all these people? Well, the In-Betweener is the living embodiment of the nature of duality in the universe. He is War and Peace. He is up and down. He's even tastes great and less filling. Now the champion, on the other hand, he's part of a collective known as the Elders of the Universe. These are beings whose races existed before the Big Bang and were subsequently destroyed in the Big Bang, with them being the only survivors and thus achieving some form of immortality. Other noteworthy members of the Elders of the Universe include Ego the Living Planet, Tenalir Tavan, the Collector, and Endui Gast, the Grandmaster.
The next Elder on Thanos' hit list is Ord Zinos, the Gardener. The Gardener has lived peacefully in his botanical wonderland. Everything that grows in his garden flourishes. He's not willing to give up his Infinity Gem, but Thanos can wait him out. The two sit as the garden soon overtakes Thanos. The Titan, however, has enough strength thanks to the gems to break free. The fact of the matter is he's actually able to combine the power of his gems. Heck, he's actually even able to briefly tap into the power of the gem that's in the Gardener's possession, which is actually the Time Gem. In fact, he's actually able to age the Gardener so much that the Gardener is completely overtaken by his garden and it kills him. Up next is the Collector, who's aware of what's been happening to his brethren and isn't willing to give up his gem unless Thanos can provide a proper trade. So Thanos decides to set out and attack another Elder of the Universe, Gilpetrodon the Runner. He too is aware of Thanos' desire and does his best to avoid him. So Thanos uses the Time Gem to age the Runner 1,000,000 years and then back into an infant. An infant Elder of the Universe is just the type of thing that the Collector could, well, collect. And so the exchange is made. Now Thanos is in possession of both the space and reality gems, and immediately undoes his spell on the Runner to return him to normal age, which winds up freeing the Collector's collection and wreaking havoc all across the ship. That leaves one final gem, the Mind Gem, which is in the possession of the Grandmaster. Of course, the gem will only leave the Grandmaster's possession via a game. Thanos must figure out a way to penetrate the various shields that are protecting the gem. If he's wrong, the gem will be thrown to the other side of everything. With that, the two engage in a mind duel on the psychic plane, and the two take shots at each other until Thanos uses some extra-dimensional thinking to maneuver behind the Grandmaster for a kill shot. Naturally, though, Grandmaster just elects to change the rules and causes Thanos' weapon to backfire in his face, trapping him in stone once more. Except this is actually what Thanos wanted the whole time, as he's now free to tamper with the shield generators and grab the Mind Gem for himself. The Grandmaster is left in a catatonic state as Thanos leaves, now in possession of all 6 Infinity Gems. The power of all the Infinity Gems flows through Thanos as he places each of them onto a specially constructed gauntlet and makes his triumphant return to Mistress Death, finally able to be her equal. Except it just isn't meant to be. Thanos' plan has worked out a little too well. He's so strong that he's literally conquered Death herself. It's no longer he that is unworthy of her, it is she that is unworthy of him.
And sadly, there's no unrequited love interest to pick up all the slack and make Thanos realize that they were the one the entire time. Anyway, let's get back to the page of the Silver Surfer.
The Surfer takes what he believes to be Thanos' body back to Titan, where it is soon discovered to be a ruse. Unfortunately, even though Drax has the drive to try to locate Thanos, he is still unable to pinpoint his location. Meanwhile, Thanos plays around with the Infinity Gems and continuing to fail with Death. It's then he decides to go after the Silver Surfer, who is still seen as a threat. He opens up a portal to Titan, which soon absorbs both the Surfer and Drax. Drax immediately goes after Thanos, only to literally be frozen mid-air. Thanos reveals that he possesses the Infinity Gems and then makes the two heroes fight each other. Finally, he absorbs the souls of both the Silver Surfer and Drax, and of course, none of this is going unnoticed.
Yes, it appears that Thanos has attracted the attention of the demon Mephisto, distracting him from breaking up Spider-Man's marriage for another 17 years.
Thanos returns to the Sanctuary 3 where a new fleet of followers has been assembled. However, he's soon able to sense Nebula's presence on the ship. He obliterates the lackey for disobeying him, but decides to keep his granddaughter alive between a permanent state of life and death. That brings Mephisto, and it turns out that the being who created the Infinity Gems also created the demon race that Mephisto is descended from. So he has access to the secrets that he's offered to reveal to Thanos, with absolutely no intention of betraying him somewhere along the way. After Mephisto provides a mere demonstration of his power, Thanos accepts his request conditionally. As that plays out, the Surfer and Drax wake up inside the Soul Gem, where a large being greets them, only to wind up being attacked by Drax. The Surfer then realizes that the two of them are trapped in Soul World, home of the first person to defeat Thanos, Adam Warlock. Drax continues to be on something of a rampage, which brings out two of Warlock's chief followers, Gamora and Pip the Troll, to explain that the Surfer can't use the power cosmic inside Soul World. However, they're willing to take the Surfer to meet Warlock at the top of a large mountain. Warlock is aware of Thanos' actions and wishes to help, but he needs the Surfer to have a clean soul, which appears impossible as it turns out some of the Surfer's memory has been altered by someone, meaning that the Surfer has to go home and deal with Galactus before Warlock can fully return. However, before they can do any of that, they need to try to get the rambunctious Drax under control. Once the Destroyer is taken down via a rear-naked choke, Warlock returns Surfer and Drax's souls to their bodies in order to prepare for battle once again. Thanos is gone when they arrive, but Mephisto is waiting for them with a warning. Thanos is preparing a grand gesture, and there's going to be a lot of damage.
Mephisto is actually pulling double duty here, as he's also dealing with Marvel's famed runaway teen duo of Cloak and Dagger. These two teenagers were lured into being tested on by a pharmaceutical company that gave them the ability to tap in the realms of darkness and light, respectively. That's really all you need to know. The rest of the story just isn't that important.
The Silver Surfer elects to send Drax back to Titan to explain things as he goes to look for Galactus. He manages to get into contact with the Planet Devourer's new herald, Frankie Ray, aka Nova, who directs the Surfer to Galactus' location.
Okay, explanation time here with these names. Frankie Ray was a UN interpreter who at a very young age was exposed to pyrotechnical chemicals that gave her the ability to suddenly burst into flame. Now, she was eventually becoming a hero of Galactus, much like the Silver Surfer had, and she was bestowed the name Nova. Now, this isn't meant to be confused with another character we've covered on this show, Richard Rider of the Nova Corps. At this point, he was a member of a teen team called the New Warriors and was going by the name Kid Nova to avoid confusion.
The Silver Surfer reaches Galactus and wants to know what alterations were made to his memory. The Surfer has always wondered why exactly it is he's never held any remorse for the planets he's destroyed while serving Galactus. It was only after talking with Adam Warlock that the Surfer came to this realization. Galactus fesses up and does admit to the memory alteration, citing the fact that constant second-guessing can't be an essential part of being a herald for Galactus. That is why Galactus altered the memories of Nora and Rad. However, for now, he is willing to grant the Surfer's request, but he does point out that, well, he may not like what he finds. The Silver Surfer is symbolically overwhelmed in guilt to the point that he's beginning to drown in the blood he spilled. Galactus manages to resuscitate the Surfer and put him back on his board, where the situation with Thanos is brought up. The Devourer seems unfazed about the Infinity Gems and Thanos' plan, but the Surfer has his doubts as he leaves. Those doubts may be a bit truer than what they seem, as Thanos soon pops up to deliver a vague warning about staying out of the way. Back on Titan, Drax arrives with no message because he actually forgot what it was he was supposed to say.
Derp-de-doo!
Thanos and Mephisto track the Silver Surfer as he heads back to Titan. Thanos can eliminate the Surfer with, well, just a snap, but there's no fun in that. So instead, the two travel to a primitive world where Thanos transforms a monkey-like creature into a giant winged beast. In order to lure the Silver Surfer into a confrontation, the two then send the monster to a nearby planet in the Surfer's path. The two brawl into the cosmos, where finally the Surfer manages to set up a trap on the monster. The trap really doesn't work, however the creature soon reverts back to normal and begins suffocating to death in the vacuum of space. As the Surfer leaves, Thanos crushes the little creature's corpse under his foot and then moves on to the next phase of his plan. Back on Titan, Thanos' original stone tomb suddenly comes back to life. The animated golem then blasts the Silver Surfer off his board, and the Surfer falls down to the planet below and begins accessing his lost memories.
I'm pretty sure most of you are already familiar with the origin of the Silver Surfer. Norrin Rad was a citizen of the peace-brokering planet of Zen-La, who offered himself up to be a herald of Galactus in order to spare his planet's destruction. Now we're actually going to get a little bit of insight into Norrin's time before that event took place.
Norrin's father, Yartron Rad, was Zenlaw's chief scientist, who had a devotion to work so intense that it rubbed off on young Norrin. This greatly confused Norrin's young love, Shala Ball, who always thought that Zenlaw was a paradise, but to the Rads, life without work was life without purpose.
The fact of the matter is, the citizens of Zenlaw have become so complacent that they started experimenting with hallucinogenic drugs to get any sort of feeling at all. I should also point out that while Silver Surfer is tapping into all of these memories, he is getting his butt tossed around by the Thanos golem.
When Norrin came of age and got his ritualistic head shaving, Yartron invented a psychosonic transmitter, which he hoped would not be as devastating as the drugs were. Unfortunately, it really didn't work at all, and the continuous malaise by the citizens of Zenlaw drove Yartron to take his own life. It was this act that finally soured Norrin on life in Zenlaw and drove him to begin dreaming to be amongst the stars. After fully tapping into his memories, the Silver Surfer manages to call out to his board that obliterates the Thanos golem. However, the statue soon reassembles and points out that even he cared for his own father, Mentor. Also, it turns out that these memories, none of them were actually altered by Galactus. The Surfer destroys the golem once again and takes off for Earth. Still, the battle has completely drained him, and he careens into Earth's atmosphere where he winds up crashing into Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum.
Here it is, the point where we finally start the Infinity Gauntlet series.
The Surfer crashes through the building's skylight, which brings the attention of Doctor Strange and Wong. The Surfer starts explaining everything to his former Defenders cohorts. Elsewhere, Thanos contemplates what exactly it is he needs to do to fully win over the affections of Mistress Death. So he tries destroying a few barely habited worlds to little effect. Meanwhile, something begins stirring inside the Soul Gem. Back on Earth, a drunken trio barrels down a highway until they go flying off a cliff. They appear to have somehow survived the ordeal, but they are in fact not the same. In reality, they've become possessed by the souls of Adam Warlock, Pip the Troll, and Gamora. Warlock explains to his two friends that they will shift back into their normal bodies over a few hours. Back at the Thanos Citadel, Mephisto suggests that Death could maybe be won over with a giant grand gesture. Like, for example, Thanos could just propose marriage via the scoreboard, or maybe even just complete his mission and eliminate half the living universe at once. Since Thanos really doesn't watch the sports, he decides to go with the latter. So he steps forward, lifts his gauntlet up to the sky, and snaps his fingers. In New York City, Spider-Man's spider sense goes off as he notices a once bustling street suddenly emptying out, and people screaming about friends and family members going missing sends him off to try to locate Mary Jane. At Avengers Mansion, Captain America looks on in horror as Hawkeye and Circe simply fade away in front of him. At the Sanctum Sanctorum, the same thing happens to Wong, and the Silver Surfer is able to sense all of it. This drives him into a deep depressive state. Across the universe, the Kree, Skrull, and Shi'ar empires are completely decimated. Even Galactus somehow winds up losing energy from a planet he's disintegrating. Finally, on Titan, Mentor himself disappears. In upstate New York, just as Pip and Gamora finish shifting into their bodies, she vanishes. And there's not really much Adam Warlock can do as he's gone into his cocoon to recharge his powers.
Pip the Troll is the former crown prince of a planet called Laxataisical. Get it? Anyway, on one occasion, Pip ingested too much hallucinogenic beer, which resulted in him being mutated into the form he currently holds. The fact of the matter is, Pip would much rather hit on chicks and smoke cigars than engage in any form of physical combat.
Back at the Sanctum, the Surfer is in such a depressive state that he's practically in a coma. Strange knows he needs to do something, but just not what to do, as performing the wrong type of spell could wind up doing even more damage. Not helping matters is the fact that Rintra has returned from a James Dean Film Festival, wondering what exactly happened.
Okay, so Doctor Strange and Wong have a couple other beings living with them at this time. The first is Rintra, a shape-shifting humanoid bull who has become something of an apprentice to the young sorcerer, and Strange's longtime love interest, Clea, the niece of the Dread Dormammu, perhaps Doctor Strange's greatest enemy.
Doctor Strange has no other choice but to enter the Silver Surfer's mind to snap him out of his funk. There is a high risk as Strange could wind up trapped in the Surfer's mind forever. The Surfer has all but given up on defeating Thanos and has fled to Zenlaw to just die. Strange sees Norrin Rad and Shala Ball talking about his desire to leave Zenlaw and see the universe. This is interrupted by the arrival of Galactus. Strange reminds the Silver Surfer that his actions actually save Zenlaw and shows Shala Ball dying thanks to the Planet Devourer's actions. The fact is, Norrin Rad bought them time to go out and try to find another world. Nothing he did was ever in vain. And Thanos can be stopped if everyone works together to try and defeat him. Meanwhile, both branches of the Avengers are hard at work helping people on planes, trains, and automobiles that lost their pilots. Also, Wendell Vaughn is contacted by Epoch to join a special council in space to discuss dealing with Thanos.
Quasar is Wendell Vaughn, a former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who donned a pair of nega bands that once belonged to a hero known as the Crusader. These bands allow him the ability to generate hard energy constructs. However, Vaughn must maintain a very even, mild-mannered temper, or else the bands will simply burn him up every time he uses them. The bands get Vaughn in touch with a being known as Eon, or his daughter Epoch, who live outside the time stream.
Doctor Strange and several other heroes are psychically contacted by Adam Warlock. He has a plan, but he's going to need a lot of help for it to work. To that end, the remaining Avengers, Hulk, Spider-Man, and even Dr. Doom are being called in. They wind up being joined by Drax the Destroyer and Fire-Lord, but not Star Fox, who has gotten abducted by Thanos. Thanos removes his brother's mouth to avoid any possible emotional manipulation. Back on Earth, Captain America delivers the statement on heroes that were apparently killed by Thanos. They include Dagger, pretty much all the Fantastic Four, most of the New Warriors, most of the X-Men save for Wolverine and Cyclops, most of Alpha Flight, Daredevil, and Box.
Not Box!
Meanwhile, Nova is busy searching for planets to sacrifice to Galactus. His energy was just halved by the Thanos wave. The Planet Eater needs energy in order to take on the Titan. However, Nova finds 2 planets but is unsure, as the Surfer has always directed her to try primitive, lesser-developed worlds to lessen the destruction. However, these 2 planets that she's found are both thriving technologically, and despite Nova's open reservations, Galactus consumes both worlds. Elsewhere on Titan, Drax and Fire-Lord are trying to locate Eros. The only problem is that neither of these 2 guys knows how to work the controlling computer of Titan that Drax was just using to watch Alf reruns. The 2 enlist the aid of a young man who just lost his parents, but they just keep arguing. Finally, Drax angrily laments the fact that there's been damage to his memory and by extension his intelligence. This makes Fire-Lord take pity on them as the 2 wind up being teleported to the Sanctorum.
Fire-Lord is a native of the planet Xandar, and thus actually a former member of the Nova Corps, who became a Herald of Galactus in order to avenge a fallen comrade who himself had actually been a previous Herald known as Airwalker. After years of service, Galactus freed Fire-Lord, save for the fact that he had to choose his replacement, which led him to the planet Earth, and led him to try pizza for the first time.
Doctor Strange and Warlock continue to assemble a team. In this case, the newest team member is Clea, who's very angry due to being left out earlier. Clea storms away as Doctor Strange tries to explain that this was all being done for her own safety. While that plays out, Pip and Rintra slip away and go through a walk through Central Park in order to let things calm down. It's there that they encounter a doomsday prophet named Silver Dragon, who blames all of magic for these circumstances. The naturally docile Rintra attacks, only to be halted by an eye blast from Silver Dragon. This in turn brings out Doctor Strange, who reveals that Silver Dragon is an old enemy who is looking to regain an eye he lost. The problem is that was turned into the new Eye of Agamotto, so now it's off limits. During a magic battle, Clea returns to aid her love, and that allows Strange to fully absorb Silver Dagger into the Eye of Agamotto. Meanwhile, the Earth is now feeling the full wrath of the Thanos wave, as it's literally been knocked from orbit and is now falling away from the sun.
Well, all except for one woman who has really bad fever and thus is hallucinating that the Earth is actually falling into the sun rather than away from it.
The structural damage to the Earth is taking the lives of even more people, and there just aren't enough heroes to try to save them. Back at Avengers Mansion, the heroes conclude that they need to try to at least take the fight to Thanos, and maybe, just maybe, they can get the Infinity Gems. Adam Warlock is allowed to strategize the battle, much to the chagrin of Dr. Doom, who would rather do that himself. First, though, Warlock and the Silver Surfer have to go to a meeting of the most powerful cosmic entities in the multiverse that Quasar and Epoch were going to earlier. Joining them, you have Uatu the Watcher, the In-Betweener, the Lords of Order and Chaos, the Lords of Love and Hate, Galactus, Chorus of Titan, and Eternity and Infinity.
Eternity and Infinity are the living embodiment of the Marvel Multiverse, with the effect that they were born in the Big Bang and can actually manipulate certain factors to a desired effect. Presiding over all these proceedings is none other than the Living Tribunal, a being who judges the balance between the entire universe and decides what is and what does not constitute an actual threat.
However, the Tribunal isn't necessarily on the side of the good guys, believing this all to just be a part of natural selection. That being said, if they want to try to stop Thanos, that isn't exactly a crime either. Warlock gets Galactus and many of the other Celestials to join in on attacking Thanos. Back at the Citadel, Thanos tries a new angle with Mistress Death. Jealousy! He makes a new girlfriend named Taraxia, and it well, still doesn't work. Thanos stops his gallivanting, though, as he senses the Silver Surfer and Warlock arriving with the other heroes. Eros looks on as the attack completely fails and Thanos freezes everyone mid-flight. He's also caught on to Adam Warlock and the Silver Surfer lying in wait, and it's not until Mephisto suggests that maybe a more evenly fought and intense battle might put Death in the mood that Thanos decides to put things on an even playing field. That being said, Thanos is still strong enough to withstand a dual attack from both the Hulk and Drax, and he responds by shrinking the Hulk down to the size of a mouse.
Meanwhile, the Hulk gets catapulted back to Earth while still in his miniaturized form, where of all things he winds up helping his longtime nemesis, Emil Blonsky the Abomination, settle things with his ex-wife and just lead him to believe that Emil Blonsky is dead. Also in all of this, Rick Jones's longtime girlfriend Marlo Chandler faints as she realizes that Rick was blipped out of existence on live television. This means that Marlo can't get in touch with Betty Ross, who's currently working at a crisis call center alongside a new employee named Veronica. Yes, this was all done just to service that one joke.
Even though the Surfer wants to join in on the battle, Warlock tells him to hold back until the time is right. It's not a terrible idea, as the heroes are slowly gaining some momentum on Thanos, only for it to fall apart when Dr. Doom gets greedy and tries to swipe the Infinity Gems. Thanos turns the power back up and manages to turn Thor into an entirely glass statue which easily smashes, and then Doom becomes frozen within inside his own uniform. Thanos then manages to shrug off being absorbed in the cloak and then catapults Drax and Firelord back to prehistoric Earth. That leaves Captain America, who's able to briefly hold his own against Thanos long enough for Warlock to finally send in the Silver Surfer to swipe the Gauntlet. The Surfer swoops in, reaches out, and misses! However, this is really all part of Warlock's plan as he calls on the cosmic entities to attack Thanos, which allows Doctor Strange to pull back some of the out-of-commission heroes to Earth. That being said, Thanos is able to prevent any further meddling from the Sorcerer Supreme by catapulting him and Clea all the way back to ancient Egypt. The two need to make their way to the Library of Alexandria in order to retrieve the spells needed to get back, picking up Drax and Firelord along the way. From there, Doctor Strange enlists the help of Dr. Druid in helping out Dr. Doom. The trio need to travel to Tibet and the monastery where Doom first learned his magic and constructed his armor. The monks proceed to place Doom inside a special furnace to restore his energy. However, that gets interrupted by an attacking Chinese force, which in turn causes the darker half of Doom's personality to manifest physically. It takes the combined effort of all three sorcerers to take down their attackers and allow Doom to re-merge with his darker half in order to maintain balance.
One of the more unique perspectives in this storyline comes from a hero called Sleepwalker. Originally a being from an area called the Mindscape who acted as a law enforcement officer, Sleepwalker wound up getting bonded to a college student named Rick Sheridan and emerging in our realm whenever Rick fell asleep.
However, a funny thing has happened as Rick Sheridan vanished in the Thanos wave, which has stranded Sleepwalker on Earth without the ability to properly revive his powers until all of this is undone. Still, he does his best to take down a villainous group called the Chain Gang, who have superpowers just as long as they're bound together. Meanwhile, the Hulk has been restored to his normal size by Doctor Strange and happens across another Doomsday Prophet, a vampire who leads his followers on a killing spree. The Hulk manages to save a priest from being crucified and fights the Doomsday leader until the sun rises, causing the killer to vanish. Elsewhere, a small branch of the Kree Empire is staging a revolution as the once mighty alien race is nowhere near full strength. However, the generals in charge have a plan to deal with the rebellion. Hire the Silver Surfer to kill the leader.
Naturally, it just turns out the hired Silver Surfer gun is just a robot, and the generals all wind up killing each other in the process.
In actuality, the real Silver Surfer is having a more of an introspective moment, recalling a time shortly after the Thanos wave where he encountered the Rhino freeing animals from a nearby zoo. The longtime Spider-Man villain, feeling that the world was ending anyway, just wanted the animals to have a taste of freedom before the end truly came. Unfortunately, all that winds up resulting is a bunch of tigers getting shot. Understanding that the Rhino's heart may have actually been in the right place, the Silver helps him return the animals back safely to their cages. Then, after failing to acquire the Infinity Gauntlet from Thanos, the Silver Surfer has a fantasy of Thanos finally winning the affections of Mistress Death and destroying everyone. The Surfer is then stripped of the power cosmic and made Thanos his slave and used to topple various cosmic empires. Eventually, the Surfer attempts to unalive himself, only to be restored to full power by Thanos. It's then that the Silver Surfer finds himself in the perceptive reality of a being called virtual reality. The Surfer's taken on a tour of his own mind, where he's confronted by the guilt he feels, not only over his father's death, but also his treatment and abandonment of Shala Bal, not to mention the added rejection of the affections of both Frankie Ray Nova and Mantis. This results in the Silver Surfer having to take on the living embodiments of denial, doubt, and guilt who have all manifested themselves in the form of his Defenders teammates. The weight of all these emotions begins to bog the Surfer down, and it's only through the forgiveness of himself via the manifestation of his loved ones that the Surfer is able to snap back to reality.
Man, that was one hell of a side trip, wasn't it? Well, now back to the main story.
Thanos has now gone far enough that he's actually able to defeat the universal cosmic entities and take them hostage. This causes several branches of reality to begin collapsing, and Eros is starting to fear the worst when he and Nebula are suddenly spared by none other than Mistress Death. Thanos then moves on into full godhood, shedding his physical form and arranging the planets so he can start smashing them into each other. Except it's briefly interrupted by the suddenly not-so-shocking betrayal of Mephisto attempting to snatch the Gauntlet. However, the demon himself is stopped by Mistress Death, and Thanos starts to ascend to full godhood just as Eternity arrives. Thanos makes quick work of Eternity and sheds his mortal form. However, this turns out to be the fatal flaw, as suddenly Nebula comes to life and grabs the Gauntlet from Thanos' unconscious body. Nebula proceeds to heal all the scars from Thanos' burns and fully restores her body back to normal. She then proceeds to pull back everyone in time to before Thanos snapped and destroyed half of the universe. Unfortunately, while doing that, she wound up undoing her previous undoing, and she's back in her burn state. So Nebula then has to undo the undoing of her undoing, and then she propels Thanos out into the cosmos, where he falls into a portal set up by Doctor Strange. As Thanos arrives on Earth, the Surfer prepares for another fight, but is talked down by Warlock. In reality, this has really been part of Warlock's plan the entire time, as Thanos actually has to be on the good guy's side for this battle to be won. Warlock's reasoning is that while Thanos has always lusted for power, the idea of knowing what to do with it once he achieved ultimate power is still a foreign concept to him, and the main reason is because he's never been fully worthy of it.
However, the Silver Surfer is still untrusting of Thanos and challenges him to an honor duel on the Mind Plane. The duel ends when Thanos gains the upper hand and the Surfer yields, with Thanos proving his honor by honoring the Surfer's request and not killing him. Now the final battle with Nebula can truly begin.
The group arrives and Thanos attempts to negotiate the return of the Infinity Gauntlet, which really doesn't work, but that's only because it's a ruse, as Warlock has somehow managed to cloak himself from Nebula's detection. Warlock silently communicates to Doctor Strange and the Silver Surfer to help free Thanos from a stone prison that he's currently trapped in, which is enough for Warlock to free the cosmic deities and have them all attack Nebula. Warlock needs a spiritual anchor for the next part of his plan to work, so he pulls both himself and the Silver Surfer into Soul World. From there, Adam Warlock is able to use the power of the Soul Gem to bond with the other gems, and thus winds up taking possession of the Gauntlet away from Nebula. When Thanos makes a power play and tries to reclaim the Gauntlet for himself, Warlock blasts him out into space, apparently killing him.
Meanwhile, Quasar returns to Earth, somehow picking up Moondragon along the way. However, she bolts once she realizes that Quasar already has a girlfriend, which is odd given the fact that Moondragon is one of the more prominent lesbian characters in the Marvel Universe. Anyway, after that, Wendell Vaughn attends the funeral for Eon, which is attended by none other than Thanos.
The Silver Surfer, Doctor Strange, and Thor then confront Adam Warlock, unsure if the gems are necessarily safe in his hands, but the fact of the matter is he wields all the power and they have no other choice, as Warlock then proceeds to send the trio back to Earth in exchange for Pip and Gamora. From there, they move on to a small planet 60 days in the future. It's where Thanos has settled down as a farmer. Warlock wants some advice, the only which is go on or give up. The trio then leave the planet unsure exactly as to what the next part of the Titans' plan is, but they're willing to let him at least live in peace for now.
Yes, the battle over the Infinity Gems appears to be over, however the universe is still quite unsettled at the moment. So now we must move on to the aftermath of the Infinity Gauntlet.
The Surfer and Doctor Strange say their goodbyes, and Silver Surfer takes off into space once more. It's then that the Surfer is jumped by an old adversary named Midnight Sun, and the two wind up brawling onto the surface of the moon and attracting the attention of the Inhumans. It turns out the Midnight Sun had been horribly disfigured by the Kree Empire, and so the Inhumans elect to take him in order to heal him, and the Surfer leaves on his way once more. Back at the Sanctum Sanctorum, a victory party of sorts is thrown for Doctor Strange, only for it to be suddenly interrupted by Pip and Gamora. The two fear that Warlock has already gone power mad, and they call on the Sorcerer Supreme back to space, where he's greeted by the sight of Warlock juggling some planets just out of boredom. Basically, Warlock has just been pulling a bunch of pranks with the universe to kill time without realizing the full implications of what he's doing. Now, however, he's actually in on an idea for universal peace by removing the free will of every individual in the universe. Strange is aghast, pointing out that free will is what makes people, well, people, even if they aren't necessarily good people. The good doctor is then able to conjure up a spell with the Wand of Watum that shows Warlock a reality without free will. A universe without such an idea is just going to stagnate and die. No innovation, no nothing. This is enough to make Warlock finally see the light, and so he calls off the idea of removing everyone's free will. However, there's no rest as he sends Doctor Strange back to Earth, as he's soon called by the Living Tribunal.
There's actually some room for concern here, as on one adventure, Adam Warlock encountered a religious cult leader bent on conquering reality named Magus, who it turned out was actually a darker version of Warlock from the future.
Eternity speaks on behalf of the cosmic deities, arguing that Thanos was too scatterbrained to truly harness the power of the gems, and thus Warlock is actually far too stable-minded. Warlock is slightly insulted by this assertion, and soon the Living Tribunal is forced to call order in the courtroom. It's only when Eternity brings up Magus that Warlock realizes they're all probably right, and so he decides to disperse the gems personally. The tribunal agrees, though it seems no one else in the courtroom does. Warlock begins assembling a team. First up is Moondragon, whose ship is busy falling apart. The sudden lack of oxygen is more than enough to convince her to join in. Up next is Drax the Destroyer, which is leading to some awkwardness.
Yeah, this is something of an awkward moment, given the fact that Drax has absolutely no memories of being Moondragon's father, and the fact that, well, their relationship has always been a little strained, especially since at one point she turned and actually killed Drax on one occasion.
As Moondragon has an uneasy reunion with her father, the rest of the team is rounded out by Pip and Gamora. Warlock then begins dispensing the gems. Pip gets the Space Gem, Moondragon the Mind Gem, Drax gets the Power Gem, which he immediately eats, and Gamora gets the Time Gem. The Soul Gem Warlock has decided that the Soul Gem will stay with him since he knows how to properly use it. As for the owner of the Reality Gem, well, that person's identity will only be known to Adam Warlock.
Spoilers, it's Thanos.
Warlock tells the team, who's dubbed themselves the Infinity Watch, to disperse until the next time they are needed. Gamora seems to be the only one who's shocked by this idea, as Pip just leaves to get laid, and Warlock and Drax head back to wherever they were going. Thankfully, Gamora is at least able to get a lift from Moondragon. Warlock elects to look up his former mentor, the High Evolutionary. However, soon arriving on Counter-Earth, he starts meeting up with a lot of resistance. He makes his way towards the Evolutionary's home, which is in a deep, dark cave, and finds him hard at work. When Warlock attempts to communicate with the one he considers the most to be a friend, the High Evolutionary just starts babbling incoherently. It's then that Nobius, the High Evolutionary's chief aide, steps out to explain that the High Evolutionary witnessed the birth of a Celestial, and it's completely shattered his mind. None of the High Evolutionary's new men have been able to successfully get him back to a medical facility for treatment due to the fact that they are constantly being tracked down and attacked by a group of space pirates. Meanwhile, Drax the Destroyer manages to encounter a bizarre-looking spaceship and gets lured on board with the promises of new episodes of Alf. Once on board the ship, though, Drax is suddenly rendered unconscious with a bouquet of flowers. It's then that the same ship begins dispatching forces back down to Counter-Earth to attack the High Evolutionary once again. The sight of the new men being overwhelmed is enough to spur Warlock to start joining the battle.
Meanwhile, the Silver Surfer is contacted by none other than the Collector, who explains that his ship was attacked and his collection has been tossed all over the place. In particular, he's lost a young girl carrying a highly infectious insanity virus. Now, the Collector really only wants the virus. The girl is of no real concern to him. And while the Silver Surfer might make for a better courier for that virus, he's also dispatched his own personal collection agency.
The Surfer clashes with the collection agency, inadvertently killing their leader Jude in the process, but does manage to expose himself to the virus and take off the Collector. However, soon the Surfer finds himself in a mysterious land of the living dead where various soldiers keep attacking him. It's then that he encounters the late Kree captain, Mar-Vell, who explains that these are the bodies of individuals killed by the Surfer when he worked for Galactus. The two team up to take down the forces and their leader, which turns out to be a dark version of the Silver Surfer, meaning this was all brought on by the exposure to the virus. So the Surfer elects to just purge the virus from his body just to stick it to the Collector. Back with Warlock, he's busy taking on the space pirates when he manages to blast one of them with the soul gem and winds up absorbing so many memories that he actually passes out. Meanwhile, Gamora and Moondragon are also taken hostage by these space pirates. As the two women are also rendered unconscious, it's then that Adam Warlock wakes up with the realization as to who it is he's fighting against. It turns out that the beings attacking the High Evolutionary and have just made their way to his chamber are being led by none other than the Man-Beast.
I've already talked about the Man-Beast in my review of the Warlock Masterworks, so yeah, I'm just not going to get into him right now.
It turns out that the Man-Beast has indeed taken all of the Infinity Watch except for Warlock hostage, including Pip somehow. He intends to use all of the Infinity Gems to take down Warlock. However, the Soul Gem has already alerted Warlock to this plan, so now he can just use the environment to his advantage to take down the Man-Beast's forces. The Man-Beast elects to start using the gems by awakening Pip and using him to transform him into some type of gelatinous monster. That being said, Warlock is still able to make quick work of the Man-Beast, and the ship soon starts blowing up. In a desperate attempt to save his friends, Warlock tries making his way to the suspended animation chambers, only to pass out along the way. Thankfully, the Infinity Watch is actually able to revive and save Adam Warlock. As the group makes it to an escape pod and sets foot on the planet below, Warlock comes to the realization that maybe this team doesn't need to break up so much and needs to stick together more often.
Back on Titan, Firelord prepares to have a very violent conversation with Nebula concerning a previous attack on the planet Xandar. And it falls to Eros to actually use his powers in a mature fashion to get everyone to calm down. Meanwhile, the Silver Surfer has encountered another old nemesis in the form of Reptile Prime, a being who got supercharged by the Thanos wave.
The fight is soon interrupted when a passing alien princess named Alisa becomes infatuated with the Silver Surfer to the point that Reptile takes her hostage. The Surfer is still able to defeat Reptile rather quickly, and he winds up rejecting Alisa's advances. When she returns to her home, Alisa performs a ritual to become the avatar for the entities of love and hate. This is being done in an attempt to put herself on the same power level as the Silver Surfer. However, when she re-encounters Norrin-Rad once again, he rejects her advances, pointing out that it has absolutely nothing to do with their power levels, it's just that he's not interested. Still, though, as the Surfer leaves, Alisa continues to be on an obsessive quest to win his affections forever.
Yeah, that's what this thing ends on. A stalker fangirl story. Well, that concludes our massive look at the Infinity Gauntlet. How was it? Well, obviously, like I said, it's one of the most important Marvel cosmic stories ever. It returned Thanos to prominence in the Marvel Universe, where he's pretty much stayed ever since. And of course, it set the stage for the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Avengers Infinity War stories. So, again, you can see how important this storyline truly is. And of course, it's coupled with some great artwork from the late great George Perez and Ron Lim, who filled in when Perez couldn't follow through on everything. And it would also be remiss that not only did Jim Starlin work on this, but also Ron Mars and I think Dan Thomas. His last name was Thomas. I can't remember the writer for the Doctor Strange bits. And, you know, it does a really good job of balancing some dark humor in this, along with the high-stakes adventures of the story. There's some great action sequences, there's good character interaction, there's good story arcs involved. It's all around just a great story. If I do have some complaints in this, it's that it can get a little repetitive sometimes. Now, back in the day when this thing was being published in issue form, the idea of taking time out of an issue to explain the backstory could make a little bit of sense. But in a trade collection, it really doesn't. I mean, seriously, the story of Thanos and Warlock is told like 3 different times. It's a little too much recapping sometimes. Likewise, once you get into the supplemental material, the tie-ins and the like, you know, the Silver Surfer and Doctor Strange tie-ins during the main Infinity Gauntlet series are pretty good, but the Hulk issues, not so much. The Quasar issue, not so much either. Or the Sleepwalker issue is okay, but other than that, yeah. Those are pretty much Red Sky tie-ins, if you're familiar with that term. So, yeah, there's a little bit of, too much fluff sometimes. And likewise, when you get into the aftermath, the Silver Surfer stories are just boring. They really add absolutely nothing to the story at all. I think the Infinity Watch stuff is okay, the Doctor Strange issue is okay, and the little bit with Firelord and Nebula is also really good, but other than that, it's the Silver Surfer stuff doesn't really belong in that collection, I think that was just done to pad out the trade. Still, overall, like I said, this is an important series. I think this is one that everyone should read. That's why the Infinity Gauntlet gets an A. You can skip the aftermath if you want, though. And with that, let's see what we'll be doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Hey guys, if you want to request a trade to be put in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box, you can do so at my Patreon at patreon.com/SleepyTimeForCat Productions. Also remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell.